up, you guys? Welcome to another episode of the Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And this is the podcast where we talk about your favorite film directors and the deeper meaning within their films. And this is a very special episode, RB3, because it is number 50.
We hit 50.
For the Meaning of Podcast, we are coming up on the year mark, unless we've already hit the year mark. Have we hit the year mark?
I have no idea, bro.
I think it's around, because I know it was like late-ish September-ish.
We gotta think there's 52 weeks in a year. We're at 50 episodes.
You lost me.
You skipped 1 week. You skipped 1 week. Actually, I think we're ahead of the... I don't know. Can you see last... You go episode 1 by possibility?
Yeah, I can do that. Let me look it up real quick.
Yeah.
And while I look it up, RB3 is going to tell me all about his amazing weekend that he had.
Amazing weekend? I mean...
We were just talking about hip-hop albums, which I think is kind of funny.
Oh, man.
I was at the live Schmodown.
Schmodown.
For anyone who doesn't know what the Schmodown is, it's a movie trivia.
I think everybody's listening to this podcast.
I know, but still, I went to the Schmodown Live, my very first Schmodown Live.
Hey!
I had a homie come up to me and tell you, RB3, that you're wrong about Eminem. And that Eminem is an angel sent from above.
Shit was whack. Kamikaze was whack.
Kamikaze is incredible.
Side of history.
So, you can give us a hot take on that, RB3.
No, I mean, Kamikaze was mostly whack. But there's, I mean... You ain't saying shit on there. I like Joe Budden's response. You see Joe Budden.
Still following Joe Budden, bro.
I ride with Joe Budden.
Ever since he left Complex, bro.
Yo, I still rock with. Wait, guess what? We left Complex too to a certain extent. No, not really, but we have nothing to do with Collider. Collider left Complex to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But hey, I support Joe Budden and any.
I tried to get a job at Complex. One of my homies was working there.
Oh, really? You been working with Natasha?
I could have been working with Natasha. It would have been me and Natasha, bro.
she's quite gorgeous.
September 26, 2017 is our first episode.
September 27th?
26th.
26th, okay.
So now we are so close.
We are 2 weeks away from our 2-year anniversary. 2 weeks to
1 year anniversary.
A 1 year anniversary.
That's right.
Yeah. So down 52. We actually have to hit 52 episodes to get there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's how it works. Either way, guys, this is episode number 50, and we are very excited because it's going to be a very different episode because we're going to be talking about film criticism, which is a topic that is, I believe, very relevant, especially with TIFF happening over the weekend, and TIFF really making a point out certain things that they can change to evolve film criticism, because it has evolved, and we're going to talk about that, but evolve it even more to a more progressive perspective. And progressive, I mean diverse, I mean more people, different kinds of backgrounds. So I felt like it was an appropriate topic to talk about today, film criticism. We're going to get into it, but before we do RB3, like we always do, we're going to go on last week's episode, which was about Danny Boyle. Someone that everyone wanted to hear about, or at least we thought everyone wanted to hear about Danny Boyle. But we went through his filmography for the most part, except for the Leonardo DiCaprio movie,
The Beach,
which we forgot.
And Shallow Graves.
But a lot of people wanted to do a Danny Boyle episode. So let's read one comment from FilmFlam945. Says, "Top shelf lads, great breakdown of Slumdog, thumbs up."
Hey,
there you go.
That's
Slumdog. Neil Varmer says, 28 days later.
Hey, wait, I gotta say something before we were talking 28 days later. 14 days ago, when we did the Ang Lee episode, I forgot to mention a very important point that I wrote down and told myself to mention. I forgot. Then I wrote it down for next week, and then I forgot to say it. I remember it now, and it's the point that I made in the Spike Lee episode, and that Ang Lee was the assistant director to Spike Lee's first movie at graduate school, or one of Spike Lee's movies at NYU. So interesting. Spike Lee was the director of this movie called of this barbershop movie. I can't remember exactly what it's called.
Yeah.
And he directed while he was at NYU, and Ang Lee was also at NYU.
Interesting.
And he was the assistant director.
Interesting.
So the Lees have collaborated, the Ang Lee and the Spike Lee.
That's cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Fun fact from RB3.
Fun fact. Sorry, it's 2 weeks later, everybody, but I remember now.
Hey, man. As long as you bring in that fun facts, that's all that people care about.
Hey.
Christian Jacob says, where does Jake Gyllenhaal rank in your favorite actors list? And is he one of the best in the world? Funny you mentioned that, Christian Jacobs, because I love Jake Gyllenhaal. I was going to say, I've talked about it quite a bit to you, RB3, I think. Yeah, he's up there. He's in I had a top 3 list for a long time. It changes as far as favorite actors, but for me it was Idris Elba as one of my favorite actors. Michael Fassbender and Jake Gyllenhaal. Not just favorite, but also like I believe some of the most talented actors working in Hollywood today. And obviously there's like legends, like there's like the Robert De Niro's and Robert Redfords and stuff like that. But for me, like when it comes to like leading man type actor, those 3 for me are like top notch. Do you have your favorites or a list or anything like that?
I mean, I don't really have them on the list right now. I kind of have to like sit down and think about it. Because to me, there's a difference between actors that I really love and then actors that are in a lot of movies that I love too. You know, I think that would have to be a distinction that I have to like kind of sit down and make. But Jake Gyllenhaal is one of the greats. I mean, I think Jake Gyllenhaal is probably one of the top ones. And going back to Ang Lee conversation, right? Brokeback Mountain. And I mean, all the films that even in the Denis Villeneuve episode when we were talking about how many incredible things that Jake Gyllenhaal has been in. So
he's great in Prisoners too.
Prisoners, Enemy. Just
Nightcrawler.
Best filmographies. Yeah, Nightcrawler.
Yeah, he was great in the. I talked about it last time with the Boston Bomber movie. He's great in that too.
It's called Light or Strong, right?
Stronger. Yeah, he's great in that movie, and you can tell. Like I saw it with my family, and I was telling my family because my whole family is Jake Gyllenhaal fans.
Yeah,
and I was telling them, and I'm like, yeah, he's trying for that Oscar. He's trying so hard, but I appreciated him trying because I was like, yeah. He got my vote for an Oscar nomination, but he didn't get one, obviously. But yeah, I think he's one of the best, and he's a very transformative actor. And I'm excited to see him play, I guess, Mysterio in the next Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, I guess so now.
Yeah, I know they've wanted a great actor for years. You know what I was thinking about?
He was originally supposed to play Spider-Man too.
And
Sam Raimi's. Or he was going to replace Tobey Maguire, I think, in Spider-Man 2.
Interesting. There you go, another fun fact from RD3. You're just full of facts today, man.
Pew, pew, pew.
Either way, what I was saying was, I know Spider-Man has been looking for a super... I mean, they're doing it now, but they've always wanted to make their villains to be incredible actors. Willem Dafoe, obviously, and we got that with Michael Keaton as an incredible actor, and now with Jake Gyllenhaal. It's something that they've always wanted to do. Remember what the Matthew McConaughey rumors were coming out?
Oh, for Mysterio?
No, they wanted Matthew McConaughey to be the villain in a Spider-Man movie. I think this might be pre-MCU. I might be. Yeah, this might be pre-MCU. But Matthew McConaughey was right when the reconnaissance was happening. They wanted him to be a Spider-Man villain, and everyone was like, "Oh, who could he be?" But now it's Jake Gyllenhaal, man. He's a new Spider-Man villain.
Yeah, unfortunately, they canceled the Black Sable or Black Cat and Silver Sable movie. Right?
I thought they made that into 2 movies.
Well, I mean, they canceled the original prayer, and the director's no longer doing it. That's not the reason why I cared. It was because the director.
Yeah, now they split it in 2, and they're going to try to make it connect to Venom.
Yeah, I don't care. And they canceled they canceled the Spike Lee one too, right?
Yes.
They canceled that one?
No. I don't think they did. You're wrong.
Well,
no.
They canceled one of them, and the one that they canceled was directed by a black woman.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and now they're doing 2 movies. But at least we got Venom and an Eminem Venom song.
Oh, god damn it.
I can't lie, dude. I texted you, right? I immediately told you. I was like, dude, I'm cool with Eminem and all, but that Venom song... Wow. It's kind of trash.
Shit's whack.
He's like, Venom, something, Venom. I'm wearing denim.
What the fuck is this, man?
I was like, ooh.
Washed out bars, bro. I could watch them in a rap battle.
No, man, don't say that.
I'm telling you, I could watch them.
No way.
I could watch them.
No, you can't, bro.
It's like, hey.
I disagree hard with that.
I can watch them.
As someone who's actually been in rap battles, and I'm not joking, I have been. And I know it sounds so goofy, but it's true. You can't.
Hey,
I've done freestyle battles, I've done ciphers, and it's no joke. And I'm telling you right now, Eminem is definitely one of the GOATs.
Yeah,
when it comes to that.
He might be, but hey, listen.
Hey,
somebody clip out this clip, send it to Eminem. Tell him to give me a 16, bro, because I'll give him a 32.
Hey, man, he hated on Lil Yachty, man.
Yeah. See, now we're talking about Jake Gyllenhaal. Listen, Eminem, he went from 8 Mile to Southpaw.
Ooh. Come on.
I got these bars.
Dude, Eminem kill you.
From Mars.
Oh. I write cars. I play the guitar.
Hey.
Dude, I'm telling you, man. You know. Moving on. David McCullough says, remember David McCullough? He's the one who recommended Danny Boyle to us.
Hey.
One of the many who says.
All right.
He says, stoked that you guys read my comment. I was at the Schmodown last night. I introduced myself to Ace. I had no idea that you guys finally did this episode. Yeah, I met David.
Hey, David.
He came up to me and he's like, hey, Ace. And he says, I love your show and I listened to the meaning of. And he's like, you got to do Danny Boyle. And I'm like, we already did Danny Boyle. Go listen to the episode. I told him. And sure enough, here he is. So shout out to David.
Let's give a round of applause to David.
You get a special round of applause. I also want to give another shout out to Sarah, who came up to me. Very nice. And she also is a fellow listener of the Meaning Of podcast.
Sarah, thank you for listening.
So shout out to Sarah for being one of our great supporters.
Yeah.
And now, let's get into what this podcast is all about, and that is film criticism. Now, RB3, when you went into film school, this was actually one of your studies, correct? This was going to be your major study.
Well, this is what I'm studying right now, Cinema and Media Studies at USC, top film school in the world, according to Hollywood Reporter. The major I'm in is Cinema and Media Studies. It used to be called Critical Studies, but they changed the name, I think, to incorporate, more diversity. And it's not just about being a critic, studying to be a critic. It's about getting a job throughout the different aspects of the cinematic arts. So usually people who are cinema media studies majors, some go on to become directors, some go on to become critics, some go on to become agents, or some go on to be development people. It's just also the most hired major in the USC Film School is cinema media studies.
Interesting.
Most of my major is concentrated on the theory, the theoretical, the criticism. I've had multiple classes with the title criticism in it. So that's,
So for you, RB3, if I were to ask you, what do you think defines film criticism, what would you say?
I think film criticism, I think it's an amalgamation of context, of perspective, and I think it's also a little bit of, I think it's a little, context. When I speak about context, I'm talking about like historical context, but it's also a part of what is around it in a cinematic context too, right? What's coming out during that time, because criticism really is, that's almost as locked in time as much as the movies are in and of themselves, And we look at how old critics used to respond to things and how the changes have come, and the way people looked at things from an objective level to a subjective level. Early on in criticism, for example, when it was just a silent age of cinema, they really only could engage in criticism from a spectacle standpoint because there was no sound. The stories in the early cinema were very basic, very elementary. So, it wasn't. But then, as time goes on and academia started to develop, and also the production code had a lot to do with how people wrote and criticized movies too. But it's all of that. It's all those factors, and I think that's what's important and cool about criticism is just how it develops over time and stuff like that.
One of the aspects of the origin of film criticism has to be the defining factor between film as a commercial product and film as an art form. Yeah. I know the French Wave was a huge part of that, but a lot of what film criticism originates from is looking at a film and saying, oh, no, this isn't just going to the cinema to see a train coming at me and screaming. It's going to the cinema to actually view an art piece. Viewing film as art didn't happen right away, right? It happened later on. Yeah. And with that came what all art comes, whether it be music, whether it be actual art pieces and paintings or film, because it's an art form.
Yeah.
Comes the criticism of it and taste and quality and all those stuff starts to play into that. So I think that's part of the origin, correct?
Yeah, that's a big part of it because when film first started, there was not as movies, not the way we think of it now. is because they used to have vaudeville performances. The vaudeville is like really trashy theater, essentially. And then like they would once they figured out how to like make a projector and stuff, they'll just project it and like, you know, in between the breaks of like performers doing whatever. And then people realized like, oh, people were like actually coming to see the stupid cheesy, you know, movies or whatever, little short things that they're putting up. So then they started closing out vaudeville theaters and converting those into movie theaters. And then, you know, very early on, it was very monopolized, very centralized. So a lot of times, even if it wasn't an independent movie, if it was like a studio-built movie, because studios started to come out like in the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, when it really started building up. But if you were a studio back then, you could own the theaters, the studio. You know, you had every branch of the production, the distribution, and the exposition of it. All three of those were just owned by, you know, one person. So even the criticism would be coming from a newspaper that was affiliated with the studio or something like that too. So, you know, it kind of changed a lot over time. But once, you know, you're right. It wasn't seen as art early on, but it kind of grew into its art form. I think a lot of it has to do with the academic writing that surrounded film at the time too, and what really helped to distinguish it as its own individual art film.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking earlier about BlacKkKlansman, and that movie kind of makes it a point to talk about Birth of a Nation. Yeah. How much Birth of a Nation actually meant to the movie industry and to how people view movies. How much did that have a play in hand? Because I know that's another portion of what recommendations became, where people actually started recommending movies where they're like, you have to see Birth of a Nation, this is crazy, it's dope. And obviously in the version of that period, but people were like actually recommending to go see this movie because it was so good. Like that was the term they were using to, you know, sell the movie.
Yeah, well, I mean, not even good. I mean, the reason why we celebrate Birth of a Nation is because it introduced a lot of like the narrative devices that cinema, you know, uses now. It introduced the close-up. It introduced, you know, the whole idea of, you know, not necessarily cross-cutting, but it's one of the ones that utilized the newer forms of cinema and started pushing narrative to a whole nother level. That's, you know, and then, so that's why it was so recognized as, you know, and why unfortunately like everybody has to study in film school, because like it is what, you know, is the definition of the combination. Because really, when you look at, you know, what was happening in, you know, foreign cinema and all that stuff, Birth of a Nation was really early on in American film history, and it kind of set the footprint for a lot of places outside the cinema sphere in the U.S. as well. So it's just interesting that this movie that's so problematic now, to say the least, racist, as I would prefer to say, but because it is so revolutionary in its filmmaking techniques, we have to regard it as so highly.
Yeah, that's crazy. And obviously that scene, and I love that movie, by the way, BlacKkKlansman. I think I don't think it's getting as much attention as it should, as far as award attention. But that scene is rough. That scene's crazy, watching that scene. But I know what eventually started taking off, you know, 60s, 70s, was newspapers. Newspapers were becoming sources for film criticism. And each paper had their own film critic, and they were getting, you know, Boston Globe, Chicago Tribune, New York Times, that kind of stuff, that's where you got your source of the star rating, or your source of, is this movie good or not, is it worth my time? It was kind of the newspaper, and that's kind of been the case forever, right? I mean, not forever, but for still now. But eventually that wasn't always the case. We're going to see now what happened to modern film criticism. But I don't know, it's interesting, right? Because we were talking beforehand about, I already forgot his name.
Roger Ebert?
Yes, Roger Ebert, and the reputation he had as being the greatest film critic of all time, or at least the most recognizable film critic of all time. And what helped with that was that TV show he had with Siskel and Ebert, where they basically broke down to the simplest terms, and that's kind of another part of film criticism, is relaying your opinion to the mass audience, to a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Whether it's like watch, don't watch. That's the simple movie review that kind of became what it is now, right? Because we see it in newspaper articles as like this actual piece that you have to read and you have to digest and you have to consume and have to interpret as, was it good, was it bad? Because not all film is easy to break down like that, and I think a lot of people are missing that nowadays, but a lot of that was that show, Siskel and Ebert, where they were told to say really quickly what the movie's about, what it does good, what it does bad, watch it, don't watch it, thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, when you look at criticism just as a general form, as a general component of movies, it, you know, it all kind of, you know, comes down from the academia standpoint, right? Like when you're talking about back in the newspaper days, like in the 60s and 70s, you know, at that point we're starting to get more ideas, you know, like we had one of the first pieces that addressed the ideas of adaptation in film was written in 1957, for example, you know, or published in 1957. You know, we have foreign people who were putting together the theories that that critics have begun to associating, auteur theory, you know, all these theories that were beginning to develop during that time. So then so critics who study film and know film like that, you know, get those readings and get a broader understanding. Well, also the movies in themselves were becoming less studio dependent. The studio system was breaking down, was more independent, you know, not more independent, more independent, but it's more unique voices of filmmaking breaking out in the 60s and 70s. That's where we get like the Lucases, the Spielbergs, the Coppolas, all the hot stuff, you know what I mean? So like at that point, criticism was looking at these movies, but also incorporating the film school. It was like the film school brats, as they say, of that generation was coming into film. There's also the film school brats coming into the criticism aspect of it, and we began taking a lot more critical evaluation. We started moving away from just looking at the spectacle, moving away from just looking at, oh, is this entertaining? Is this wholehearted? What does the movie have to say? What does it do? What does it say about the artist? What does it reflect? You know, these are ideas that started becoming introduced. And I think once, you know, we started thinking on a more elevated level, and as technology develops and the world starts being able to communicate with each other more and more, the world and the audience gets wiser to it too. So I think to the point that we get to the TV critics, you know, and Ebert and Siskel era, you know, that's at a point where movies are becoming mass products, you know, like they've always been mass products throughout their existence, but this is when Sony's buying Columbia Pictures. This is when Coca-Cola's buying, you know, this company. This is when literally everybody when all the conglomerates are starting to come into the movie business. So TV networks are cashing in on that too, so they understand there's a niche market for people who enjoy criticism, so that's why they brought in a show like Siskel and Ebert, which actually ended up influencing a lot of people too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good show. It's definitely no takeaway, nothing negative against them, because for me, I still think it's a good idea to do that kind of show. And it's kind of funny how nowadays, obviously we're going to get into that a little bit more because I have a section set out for it, but how nowadays the replacement of that show is YouTube, right? It's what we see on YouTube.
The schmoes.
Yeah, like the schmoes. But that's kind of on TV. That's where it started. And I'm assuming there was other few television shows dedicated to film criticism, whether it be a short half-an-hour show, whether it be anything else. But I mean, I'm assuming there was quite a bit. But for me, what defines film criticism now? Let's get to modern times because I feel like that's what we know more. It's kind of crazy. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but it's kind of nutty. Because now, talking 2018, we have the not monster, but we have the craziness known as Rotten Tomatoes, where Rotten Tomatoes developed a system, which is a great system, because it works, saying, how would you rate this movie? And based on that rating, they take from the critic, they would say rotten fresh, whether it be 1 out of 10, whether it be 1 out of 5, whether it be, you know, grades A plus, B plus, C, whatever it is, they have a cutoff saying if it's below this amount, on the way you grade this movie, it's rotten. If it's above this amount, the way even if it's like a point above it, it's like a barely passing grade, we're going to give it a fresh. And from there, we're going to take all the critics, put them all in, you know, a system, a website, and say how many percentage of critics liked or didn't like this movie. So that's how we're going to place it. And from there, we have a rating system of percentage. So we see ratings like 89%, 92%, 54%, 43%. That is the amount of critics who gave it a passing score. It could be A, it could be C+. Like it could be barely passing or it could be amazing. And you don't know that unless you click on the critic and you read what they're actually saying. But honestly, RB3, most people don't do that. And in fact, most people see that rating system as all the critics agree that this movie gets an A+. This movie gets a 95. Like, oh, 95, oh, that means it's an amazing movie. That all the critics said it's an A+ movie. And it's like, that's not the case at all. And it's crazy how, I know it's always said on any movie YouTube channel, but it's true, or any movie podcast, as a person who talks to people who aren't into movies as much as I am or you are, most people still think that means that movie got a 92%. That's the grade they get. That's what they see, or it got a 43%. And it's like, well, that movie's terrible. I'm not going to see it. That's how people read Rotten Tomatoes. And that's the biggest problem with the website. It's not them, it's the audience that they're reaching out to. The people who actually go on the website, go on there, read the rating, and assume, oh, that's the rating they gave it. It must mean it's a bad movie, I'm not going to watch the movie. Where, in reality, that's not what it's saying at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what we want like Rotten Tomatoes to do about it. You know what I mean? Like,
they can. It's literally all you have to do is teach your audience.
What you have to do is fucking use Metacritic, people. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been saying this for years.
I still like
Metacritic. Nah, fuck Rotten Tomatoes. I'm just kidding. I love Rotten Tomatoes. I love Rotten Tomatoes. I actually love Rotten Tomatoes. Where's my fresh and Rotten? Did I bring that?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't bring it. Man, I love Rotten Tomatoes.
You know what people should do, RB3? And I've said this to my brother, I've said this to friends of mine, I've said this to everyone. Go read critics' reviews. Go read a few critics. Pick a few. How do you pick them? Ask people for recommendations. Who do you recommend as a film critic? Who should I read? Read some reviews on the Rotten Tomatoes websites because they give you a link to it. So you can actually go on Rotten Tomatoes, scroll through some reviews, and just click on a name or click on an outlet that you think is compelling and that you think might have some good information, and that'll give you a different opinion. I think that's the best thing that people should do, is like read 4 or 5 reviews from one of the critics from Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, I think, you know, when we talk about the history, going back to the history a little bit, back in the day, the critics had a lot of power in determining, what a movie made, how much a movie impacted the audience. You know what I mean? Because back in the day, back in the early cinema, that was the only way people got recommendations for movies, was reading it through the newspaper, was reading it through the critics, or reading it through the Showtimes or whatever, the recommendations, you know? Now as time goes on, the word of mouth matters a lot more because people are able to communicate a lot better. The fan scores matter a lot more, so everything's a lot more accessible. Now, if you're asking me what I prefer, but then, you know, critics also have a lot of power today too, because we see the Rotten Tomatoes score having a very direct effect on how a movie performs or doesn't perform. But that being said, I mean, I think, you know, we can only ask for the aggravator to do so much. I feel like the audience has to wisen up to a certain extent when it comes to Rotten Tomatoes, because I feel like Rotten Tomatoes does more net good than net bad for the film community. So that's just where I think.
The problem is the vast majority. I'm making assumptions, but if I'm making assumptions, there's a ton of old people who love watching movies.
Yeah,
love it. They adore Rotten Tomatoes. Mm-hmm. They base everything on Rotten Tomatoes. The problem is, a lot of them, I'm not saying all, still read it like I just told you, saying, oh, it's a 92. Oh, that means it's an amazing movie. I'm going to go watch it. Or I got a 26%. Oh, I'm not going to watch that movie. 26% means it's F. No, it only means 26% didn't give it the grade that the Rotten Tomatoes was looking for as far as thumbs up or thumbs down. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it got like a 4.5 out of 10, it's considered rotten, but it's barely rotten, considering under that term, or a 5 out of 10. You know, it's rotten, but it's not as rotten. So there is, you know, little wrinkles in there that people don't really take in because that's not what they want to do. They don't want to read positive or negative. Have you read a review, RB3, that says good, 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 bad, 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 make up your own mind? This is everything that's good in the movie. I've read a ton of those reviews, and I can't lie. Part of me is like, I appreciate it, and part of me is like, then what? What do you want me to do with this information? And it's kind of frustrating as a movie-going audience member that I am as a movie fan, because I was like, well, tell me, is it good or not?
Yeah.
I've read reviews like that where I'm like, what are you trying to say though? Like, is it dope? Because
that's one of my biggest problems with like. And that's why you really have to find a critic.
But that's nuance, though.
But that's nuance. Nuance is important. I do like a critic that is clearly like and I think that's what made Roger Ebert so great, because he was such a brilliant writer that when you read his reviews, even though they're very nuanced, very layered, it went over the good, the bad, the positive, the negative, it was still very, very clear what he ended up aligning with the movie. You know what I mean? Like, it was just clear through the tone. Just, sometimes it was a little more snarkier, which was a little funnier, but would also mean the movie's pretty much bad or whatever. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's like that. That's what to me. So for me, like, I always have a hard time with critics who write very detailed think pieces on the positive and negatives, but I have no idea where they stand on it. You know what I mean? And that frustrates me more than not reading the review at all. That frustrates me more, because I really appreciate understanding. And I think that's what criticism is, to a certain extent, is lending your own perspective to your viewing experience. And I think that's one of the biggest things that is overlooked when it comes to criticism, is how personal experiences, how an individual critic's life choices or experiences, or even movie watches, it influences their opinions on a particular movie.
100%. That literally brought me to my next point that I have outlined here, is the fact that backgrounds affect perspective. My life, my background, what I went through in life, as long as I've lived, which is not as long as some other people, what I know as far as film knowledge plays into that, but my background plays more into it. My emotions play more into it. And people have different backgrounds, RB3. That's the problem. If I say this movie's, if I tell a 67-year-old grandma living in Georgia that Shape of Water is a really good movie, you see what I'm saying? She's probably not going to get what a 28-year-old living in Los Angeles who dealt with some stuff in the past is going to get from Shape of Water.
Yeah.
Stuff like that is what I get. I don't get frustrated with it, but I just feel like it's a little bit, like you said, it's not, people don't pay enough attention to it. Yeah. Your background is going to play a big factor. Your age, your demographic, your religious views, whatever it may be, is going to play a massive factor on how you view a movie, whether positively or negatively. And I think a lot of people don't get that. And I think that's a problem with Hollywood in general and with film criticism, but that's a problem with who we have doing these, reviews and being film critics. And that's a problem that a lot of people are starting now to shine a spotlight on it, because I feel like if we have the same people, the same type of people, demographic, same age range, review all these movies, then you're going to get the exact same opinions. We need to diversify this on every level, on an age level, on a demographic level, on background level, because that is when you start to get a perspective that people can start to appreciate a little bit more. And it's not necessarily like, if I'm a Mexican dude living in LA, I have to read a review from a Mexican dude living in LA. Like, that's not what I'm trying to say. Of course, read everyone else's reviews. But what I'm trying to say is, people making the decisions of what is good and what is bad, if they're all the same people, you're going to start to see a pattern of what they're seeing. And that might not necessarily reflect your views and your perspective when you watch a film. And that, to me, is so important, because it literally can impact, like you said, box office and success of a movie and quality of a movie. Because I really, I insist so much, your personal baggage, whatever you take inside a movie, is going to make a bigger difference than the quality in acting, the quality in the shots, and the quality in everything else. That is the biggest thing that's going to take you in. And that's where we're seeing such a massive success, for the most part, with superhero movies. Because a lot of people start to relate nostalgia with quality. And do you feel, RB3, like that's a negative thing that should be kind of weeded out? Because nowadays we're getting shows like Stranger Things or other reboots and remakes or retellings of the same stories that 37-year-olds loved as a kid, and now they're making reviews on it and they say they love it again because it reminded them of what they felt as a kid. How nostalgia is starting to become film criticism itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's just always going to happen, though. Like there's always going to be people longing for. But I think it's a different wave. Like I think if in 10 years, if you and me are still doing film criticism, we're going to look more towards how movies in the 2000s were made, like how movies were like a little more commercially viable, but still like pretty because I think there's always a wave. I think we have a wave, and I've always said this. I think every 30 years we're just gonna keep going through the same shit. Like like the 50s is gonna turn into the 80s, it's gonna turn into the 2010s. This all the same homogenized recycled bullshit that revolves to 30 years before in the 1920s. That's just like, oh, here's the stories that we're telling about the classic Americana, the lifestyle that we have to live at home. It's the same shit. But then, when we get to like the 1930s or the 1960s and 1990s, that 30-year cycle, that's some hard shit. That's when we get the Citizen Kanes. That's when we get that's when we get the what's that one with Dustin Hoffman? Not Dustin Hoffman. Yeah, Dustin Hoffman, Jack Nicholson. Easy Rider, we get that type of shit in the 60s. We get Pulp Fiction in the 90s, and in the 40s we get Casablanca. In the 70s we get,
It's because the people making the movies.
We get tired of the same shit eventually. But we'll get tired of the same shit, and then the critics are going to get tired of seeing the same shit.
But it's because the people making the movies are from those generations. So they're making callbacks to their generation. Yeah. I just saw the trailer for a movie called Mid-90s.
Yeah.
And I think it's directed Jonah Hill.
Yeah.
Where I was like, now come the 90s.
Yeah. We're going to head right into that 90s.
Yeah, now it's going to be the 90s, and then it's going to be the 2000s.
Everything's going to be clueless.
I'm going to be like 38 or 40 in like, I don't know, 2028 or 2032 or something like that, and I'm going to make movies about my era. You bet your ass I am, RB3, because that's my era. So I'm going to talk about like 1999 and stuff like that, because that's my nostalgia, that's my connection, whereas other people who are making movies nowadays have that connection to the 80s, and the people nowadays who are reviewing movies have that connection to the 80s. I will never understand people. Well, I will understand, but it's frustrating to talk to people, RB3. People that we are familiar with, and we have conversations with, and I say stuff like, I like the prequels, and they look at me like I'm insane. They don't realize that when they say stuff like, I like, I don't know, Gremlins 2, or some shit movie. That's
Gremlins 2 is hard.
Or whatever it is. Whatever nostalgic piece of shit they like. Yeah. Because there's a lot of nostalgic 80s shit. That's shit.
It's awful.
I'm telling you. You're like, oh, that movie's awesome. I'm like, that movie's shit. I'm telling you right now, it's shit. You think it's awesome because you grew up on that movie and you saw it like 20 times as a kid. That's why I think the prequels are awesome too, because I have that nostalgic memory with the prequels and I thought they were dope. So for me, it's like, come on, man, we got to meet in the middle somewhere where we start to understand that maybe I do like this movie simply because of nostalgia. Maybe I do like this movie because I relate it to my childhood or to having a better life and not having the adult responsibilities that I currently have now. That is a huge part of movie criticism, a huge part of movie reviews itself.
Yeah.
Is what we relate our personal background with this certain movie. How we treasure movies that are terrible because they remind us of happier times as a kid or something like that.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the most. Well, I mean, again, it's all based on experiences, and I think that and I think that's where I've always felt that my position has always come from is that I feel like you're so influenced by what you watch as a kid. I always go back to saying they say garbage in, garbage out. If you watch a bunch of garbage, you're going to make a bunch of garbage, or you're going to talk about a bunch of garbage. You know what I mean? So I always felt I felt and still feel very passionately about, if you give, people who are poor, or people from lower income communities, or people of color, or people from marginalized groups more opportunity to see movies, we will see a new form. We will see a lot better stuff happening in the world, like not just in the context of movies, just in general. I think people will be a lot more understanding of other perspectives. Because I remember one of when Bibiani came on the Schmoes No Show, episode 283, and they were talking about like film criticism in general. And what he was saying is that and I felt very moved by it, is that a lot for me or for Bibiani, he was saying, and I connected to it as well. He said, I don't go to the movies to watch myself on screen. I go to the movies to watch other perspectives, other worlds, other stories, right? And I think that's very much why I go to the movies. I think that's why I think the more movies you watch, just the more universally generous you become as a person. I think, you know what I mean?
Sure.
More universally, you're able to connect on the people on a more empathetic level, I think, than if you were just a non-moviegoer. So I don't know. So I think that's why I say yes, MoviePass, yes, Netflix have always had the consistent position of give more people movies, and I think that's why.
Here's my question to you, Ep50, and it's a question that I've been thinking about pretty much all day. Is the counter to that argument? No, nothing against Bibiani, but the concept of like, well, what if I am a black guy who has a lot of opinions on movies, and I can write a review just as good as Bibiani can on this movie, and instead of saying it's different than me, it's the same as me. What if you're saying now? Obviously I'm playing devil's advocate, but I'm saying like if they make like this crazy cool Mexican movie and they get a 47-year-old white guy to review it because it's a different perspective from him, I feel kind of left out because I'm like, wait a minute, what about my perspective? This is talking about my childhood, not your childhood. Shouldn't I have something to say about it too?
Right.
It's the idea of diversifying not just the movies, how the movies are getting more and more diverse, but the film critics remain to be the same old white dudes. It just is old white dudes.
Yeah, well, I think
older white dudes.
Well, I think Bibiani in that case was referring to like wasn't referring to like reading criticism. I think he was referring to like seeing diversity on screen.
Well, that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there's no question that we're finally getting to a place where we're starting to see different types of people in front of the camera. The problem is the people talking about these movies, the people discussing them, the people who are the flag bearers, the people who give you your perspective on how to view a movie, who are film critics, whether that be written reviews or video reviews, are the same. We're seeing Sterling K. Brown, we're seeing Daniel Kaluuya, we're seeing all these people come out, and Jordan Peele, Spike Lee, killing it. And I read 20 reviews, and all 20 of them are 52-year-old white dudes. Like, you don't see a problem with? I do. I personally feel like, wait a minute, I thought we can have both. Why is one thing being like, cool, it's a black movie, I'm a white guy, and I'm going to say cool to the black movie because I don't want to be seen as racist. You see what I'm saying? Like, I think that's something that people are kind of ignoring.
Yeah.
Where if we start to see more diversification, which I'm going to talk about that too, because I feel like there's a problem too with people talking about diversity. Because diversity is not, there's a great video on College Humor where they make a skit about it, and they talk about diversity, and it's clutch, it's dope, because they literally talk about how a host comes out and they talk about diversity like a fashion trend. And it's like a fashion host, like, diversity is in this summer because it's so cool. And then she talks to experts who are actual like activists and stuff, and they say, no, diversity isn't getting a black guy to review a black film. Diversity isn't getting a Mexican guy to talk about a Mexican movie. Diversity is within itself the world. It's a reflection of reality. It's a reflection of society. It's a reflection of what we see now in America or in the world. The fact is, there is a lot of Mexican people living here. There is a lot of black people living here, Asian people, whatever it may be. Let's have that same reflection reflect into the Hollywood industry, into the people making movies, the people talking about movies, the people who are directing and acting and reviewing these movies. Let's have an accurate representation of the diversity we see in real life, not fakeness not something they're pushing their agenda. It's no push agenda. It's what you walk out your door and see. You just refuse to see it and you ignore it and you just want to see your perspective. That is what diversity is. And I feel like we get that and we're starting to see that a little bit more because I do feel like where the Mexicans at and where the Latinos at. I've said that for years and I still insist that there's no Latino movies. There's no Latinos who are front-leading men. You know, maybe Oscar Isaac and that's kind of it. So I personally feel like we're still way behind. And considering that in 2050 Latinos are going to be part of the majority of the U.S. I mean, come on. We're getting more and more populated inside America. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is diversity in film, diversity behind the camera of the people talking about the film. And to be honest, RB3, I don't see that.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing. There's a lot of good efforts to push for more diversity in film criticism. I know you mentioned Toronto International Film Festival. They started a mandate where they're requesting a minimum, was it like 25% of people of color come out there and stuff like that. And there's also with Black Klansmen. The reason I got to see that was because Jordan Peele's production company, along with Matthew A. Cherry from Twitter. I don't really know him. I guess he used to play football, or he used to play football now as a film director. But I just know him from Twitter, honestly. He's probably a great producer. He produced Black Klansmen, so I shouldn't talk about it like that. But anyway, he put out a call where he was like, "Hey, if you are a person of color critic, email me and we'll get you into Black Klansmen." So I did it, and I actually did get into that. So salute to them. So they're people are making people are trying to make the effort and grow out. And I think you gotta look at the roots, right? Like I go to film school. And I'm a cinema media studies major, and like no joke, if it's a lecture class of 300, there might be 4 black people in there. 4.
Can I follow up with you?
Yeah.
I've worked in the industry for 4 years in a television production company. We had, I believe, 56 employees. I was the only non-white person there. I'm not joking.
Yeah.
And there was 3 white women. It's real. Like when you work in the industry, when you actually work in the industry, grips, PAs, producers, cameramen, all white. Yeah. All white. And it's cool. I love, this is my family. We're cool. I love working with them. They're the coolest people ever. And they're very aware. They're self-aware of what it is. But that's hard, man. That goes hard. I don't know if it's the same thing for you, what you just said.
Yeah. Well, again, it got to start at the roots, right? And I think that's why, honestly, maybe this is a little too extreme, but maybe I got to say it. Maybe the government should start letting people watch free movies, man. God damn it.
Well, here's my follow-up to you into my next conversation. The difference between blockbusters and art house films. And one of my topics of conversation is that the movies that we're seeing, and you may disagree with me, but the movies that we're seeing succeed in diversifying their on-screen presence are small, independent movies. That's just the case.
I agree with
movies like
that for the most part.
Movies like Moonlight, movies like Get Out, movies like Sorry to Bother You, movies like, those are the kind of movies that are getting more and more diverse, are smaller, independent, art house movies that only play in a few select cities and a few select cinemas. Let me talk about Sorry to Bother You. We saw it together, and I had a lot to say, RB3, about Sorry to Bother You, because the irony of Boots Riley making this movie and just stamping it like black, Lakeith Stanfield lead, Tessa Thompson lead, 2 black leads, let's go. And the irony that you and I sat in an audience that, no joke, because walking out, I saw them, I think you went to the bathroom, and I saw all of them walking out, it was like 98% white. There was I think we saw a few black people, and that's it.
Yeah.
And the irony that Boots Riley is like, yo, black people, we're going to make this. And I told you after the film, I'm like, are black people really going to like this film?
Yeah.
And what did you say?
Think so.
And you said you don't think so.
Yeah.
Like that's the irony that we're saying, yeah, this is cool, and the people watching the movies are only art house movies, and the movies that black people actually like are not really being paid attention to.
Yeah. I would say I think young black people like Sorry to Bother You.
Okay.
Because I actually did end up talking to somebody who's not a movie fan but is black and saw Sorry to Bother You, and they really enjoyed it. Yeah. But then They're young too, so I think if you're like under 25,
I was gonna say
like under 30, no, I'm just kidding.
I'm gonna talk about something else.
Yeah,
You're gonna pull up Grace Randolph and say, there was an Asian man who said he liked it outside of the theater. I guess that means Asians love it.
I'm not doing that.
But shit, I can go off on that conversation, which I'm not going to do, guys.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, blockbusters are doing pretty good too, though. I feel like
that's true. I agree with you, Black Panther, but I feel like
Crazy Rich Asians.
Crazy Rich Asians, I agree with that. But the problem is, like, the idea always goes back to money. Access. Movie access. Getting people to see these movies, and then when they see them, to see if they actually like these kind of movies. If you make a Latino film, do Latinos actually like this movie? The irony that a movie like Shape of Water was praised because of Guillermo del Toro, and the irony that if you show this to most Latinos are going to be like, this fish-loving movie is kind of weird.
Yeah.
I do not like it. I guarantee it. Like, most Latinos would not like Shape of Water. I know that for a fact. So it's kind of ironic that, it's like, yo, Mexican, let's go. And it's like, Mexicans wouldn't really like this movie to begin with. Because it's an art house, independent, very specific, stylistic movie.
That's why we need to have more accessibility to these movies, so people who are young and people who are black or Latino, if you're black and watching Sorry to Bother You, you should be able to watch that and be able to have access to that instead of just letting these white motherfuckers see it. You know what I mean? Instead of just having the bougie, upper class, ArcLight Hollywood crowd be allowed to see a pro-black, pro-union, pro-worker movie. Who are the people? Because they have no effect on it. They have no people who watched Sorry to Bother You that night when we watched it have no connection to being a hard worker.
And they loved it, though.
Yeah,
they were like, this is awesome. This is great.
Yeah.
But that's kind of my problem, is the fact that we're seeing all these super duper rich, because they're rich, white people see these movies and love these movies and then just proclaim that they love it. But the problem is, the people who are making it, the black filmmakers, the black leads, like Lakeith, like Boots Riley, talking about how this movie is going to be like all of it, like you said, pro-worker, pro-black. How many black people saw this movie? I guarantee you, if there was a demo chart, it'd be pretty low, considering how many white people saw it.
But then again, that's what I'm saying. Like, if
Black Panther to me is the one, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Black Panther to me is the one that is starting to take that flag. But how many people on Twitter and on other stuff that I follow, and I can tell you a personal story, but on Twitter that you saw, were buying tickets for young people to see this movie because they still couldn't afford to see Black Panther.
Yeah, exactly. These are marginalized communities, and that's exactly what I was getting to. Is that if Movie Pass gave people that option, kind of failed, but whatever. Netflix is still continuing to give people the ability, the accessibility to explore
for a fair price.
Shit. Yeah, for a fair, and I think I think more people are becoming more film literate because of Netflix. I think there's a lot of people who really know a lot more about film and television as solely because of Netflix.
Well, one thing I wanted to say that I just think it's a funny story. My church bought out like dozens and dozens of theaters for weeks for kids in communities here in LA that are really poor communities to see Black Panther. And as soon as our pastor said that, we were like, that's crazy. This church is dope.
That's nice.
And that's why I love my church, and he told us, he's like, oh yeah, what we want to do is we want to get these black kids being able to see an awesome black kick-ass character. And we asked every single one of them, like, have you seen this movie? And all of them said no. Like, the irony that, like, all these kids want to see this movie and they're not able to is what our pastor was telling us. So we're going to give them that chance. And then he started, like, passing buckets and we're like, yo, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But it's...
Yeah, when I make the same point on Twitter, motherfuckers is like, oh, you're invalidating criticism.
Oh, no, dude, yeah. And we went in and he went in to tell us, like, this is still the kind of Christian love that we're supposed to show as Christians. And that's like, because people are very specific on where my money is going in church. And the fact that he was like, oh no, this is Christ-like to the nth degree, man. This is super Christ-like. And when he told us that, we were like, yeah, it's kind of true. But that's my thing too, is the audience relating to that factor of who's making these movies. when you talked about film literate, I want to talk to you, RB3, real quick about taste. Do you think taste is real? Taste in films is real. Do you think that's real, or do you think that's fake? There's so many people nowadays in 2018, RB3, who on every YouTube channel you're going to talk about, or in any film website review, and I'm pretty sure you have the same opinion, but it's that everyone has a different opinion. Do you agree with that? Do you agree that some movies just are trash? And it's not like, well, in my perspective, this movie is greatness because of this scene, this scene, this scene. Do you think there's an actual thing is like, you have bad taste in movies, you have good taste in movies. You know when a good movie is good and when a bad movie is bad.
Well, no, I think there's definitely...
Because I do believe, I'm a snob, dude. I totally believe, like, your movie opinions are trash, bro. Like, I straight up have told you personally about certain people that I'm like, their opinions are kind of trash.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're talking about.
You know, I mean, there's, I mean, you know, there are some, you could definitely, I think there's a little more objectivity to people.
Well, that's the thing. Movies are a subjective kind of argument where I highly disagree. I think there's movies that are bad. Where it's like, well, no movie is bad. It's like, yeah, there is bad movies, man. Yeah. I've seen some, and they're just objectively bad.
Yeah, well, there's ways. I mean, there's definitely movies that are objectively bad that I like. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
There's definitely movies that are not. You know, because there's a certain way to look at a movie objectively, right? If you could, movies are subjective, but you could. Objectively speaking, you could count the number of cuts in the movie. Objectively speaking, you could count how long it take last, or if something's overexposed.
But does the vast majority have that knowledge of objectivity? Because the vast majority of I'm talking about people who go see Transformers, and love Transformers, and don't realize this is a trash movie. You're watching trash because they're not film literate, like you said. They don't know what's an objectively bad movie. Bad acting, bad lighting, too many cuts, jerky camera movements, story. Plot holes, logical decisions from characters, like actual things that go into a cohesive, good movie.
Yeah.
Do the vast majority of movie-going audiences know those things? RB3?
No. Well,
no.
I think inherently, to some extent, they'll know. To the most basic level, people know what a bad story is.
Okay.
To the most basic level, I definitely think that. If there's a movie like The Snowman, I didn't see The Snowman, so I don't really know like how bad it is. But I think objectively speaking, the critics and the audiences both agree like this is a bad movie.
Well, here it is too. I think a part of it too is genre. Part of it too is based on what you're paying to see.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example that literally just happened over the weekend. The Nun currently has a 26% of Rotten Tomatoes.
I saw that shit.
The Nun made bonkers money over the weekend in box office.
I saw it.
It made $53 million, which is huge. As soon as I saw that number, I was like, $53 million. And then I remembered, if I'm a random guy who watches movies sometimes, right? Just a regular general movie-going audience who only watches movies a few times a year. And I see the trailers for the Scary Nun movie, you bet your ass I'm going to take my girlfriend to see that Scary Nun movie. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't care if it's a 20% Rotten Tomatoes. I'm still going to go see that Scary Nun movie because I want to get scared by a Scary Nun. Like, the simple math that takes place between you're not really going in for a quality story when it comes to something like The Nun.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, I saw The Nun and it wasn't a good movie, but I mean, you see, that's the thing. I don't really get scared by horror movies all that much, so like...
Not me, I'm the chicken. I get scared over everything.
You see, now, I gotta see Hereditary.
Hereditary is different, though.
See, but yeah...
Because I don't even think Hereditary is more scary than it is disturbing. It's one of those horror movies that are just disturbing. That's like the best word to use to describe Hereditary. It hurts.
I figured it out.
It hurts, RB3.
I figured it out.
It still hurts.
I'm gonna get around to watching it. But the larger point I was making is that those movies tend, The Nun, for example, did very well. I saw it in an urban theater, Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Theater, and it's all mostly black, mostly Latino audiences.
Well,
and they eat up horror movies. You know what I mean? So,
man, I was gonna say, like, that's the thing that I've been saying for years, and it's one of those statements that a lot of people don't understand unless you live like in a city like LA. Mm-hmm. Latinos love horror movies. We adore horror movies. You have no idea how many crap horror movies came out last year. And and I would go by the theater, and everyone walking out was Mexican. It's because we love horror movies, man. Like, how many people... Like, I think I actually saw the demo charts, I don't remember them, but of last year. It was a huge Latino-based market. And the fact that it was made by a Latino director, too, played a huge hand. But like you said, dude, you saw The Nun. How many Mexicans went to see The Nun? A shit ton of Mexicans went to see The Nun. I know that for a fact. Like, that's the most Mexican type. There was like a Mexican production, right? Like, it was actually Mexican actors and I think so. I think it was, because it's the most, like...
Catholic
Catholicism, and like as an actual Latino kid, if you're raised in Catholicism, hell yeah, you're afraid of a scary nun. That's like the most Mexican thing that I know, and I guarantee that's played a huge hand in the box office of The Nun, was the Latino market. But like you said, yeah, they don't care. They just want to see a scary movie.
Yeah. But no, I think definitely. So I'm hoping that one day we could put a little money back into the school system. We could start film classes in urban communities. You know what I mean? Like, Compton High needs a little couple film classes. You know what I mean? Get some classes out there in Detroit, let Southside Chicago, let people have a little outlet for doing that, doing stupid shit. Let them watch a couple movies, and boom, you have probably a whole new generation. Because I feel like it's tough when the whole idea of being inclusive when it comes to criticism, I definitely want like when you're talking about how there's 57 white guys, I want to see more black people get those spots. I also want more black critics to be responsible in seeing more movies as well too, because I think there's a lot of people who are not just black critics, but I think people of color who haven't had the same opportunities to watch the same amount of movies, the same kind of movies that I would be getting from that a critic of somebody who is an older white guy who's had the opportunity to see a bunch of movies, who had the opportunity to go to the independent theater and see this French 1983 French movie or whatever, and they have this insane, a lot of people just don't have the opportunity to get that, and I want that to happen. And then I want to see a whole wave of young people of color watching a shit ton of movies, and then those people becoming critics.
Yes, I mean, that's the thing that people don't understand, is the fact that a lot of it comes from their backgrounds, right? Privilege.
Yes.
It's all about privilege.
The
privilege to, you haven't seen these movies? Yes. I haven't had the privilege to see these movies,
exactly.
You asshole.
Yes.
Like, people don't understand. Like, I'm not a rich white dude who went to like a super cool film school that was paid by their parents to see all these dope ass movies, you douche. Like, that's people don't get that, and I've heard that so many times. Like, have you not seen these movies? Well, maybe because one, it's not in my generation, and two, I don't have that opportunity, man. Like, I didn't grow up with the same background that you did, and I don't think people understand that kind of definition. A film critic is like saying, well, if you've not seen that, then you can't be a film critic, man. It's like, well, that's a different background. That's discriminating against what I've grown up with, and that, I think that's a huge factor that a lot of people don't pay attention to, which is why we still have 88% white male critics. Like, it's a crazy number. Like, and then even the female critics, sorry, it's all white women too. Like, I mean, when you start, and I know I'm going to get a lot of shit for this, but when you start waving the diversity flag and say, look how diverse we are because we hired 20 white women, I'm sorry, you're not. I'm sorry. I'm just being honest. You're not. You're just not. When that starts to happen to me, I also feel like it's just not the same, man. Women of color is a very, very, very different standard.
They're getting discriminated on two fronts.
Yeah, and it's something that a lot of people... for me, like, I forget who I was watching that said it best. When you pan to an office room and says, "Look how diverse we are," by saying, "Look, we hired 20 white women." It's like, well, you're not diverse. You just hired 20 white women who have the same background and who all have the same careers and who all went to the same school and got paid for. Like, it's not. That's not diversity. I'm sorry, it just isn't. Like, of course we need more women. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, like, if you really want to diversify certain things, get people from different backgrounds, get people from different demographics. That's diversity, because it's an appropriate reflection on reality, not the same neighborhood that we've all grown up in. Like, that to me is a huge factor, because I do feel like there needs to be more recognition towards people of color who are being seen in more movies and not being seen behind the scenes, giving their perspective and their opinion on this movie. And I want to make it very clear that I read a ton of white critics, and I think that's because I'm going to them because of their knowledge and because I do respect them. This is nothing against that, of course not. We're not trying to tear down anyone else. We're just trying to bring a different
we gotta bring because listen, like when you're going back to like, you know, or when I mentioned like, do you think we're gonna be watching some strange foreign movies, you know, in the hood, like, and you know, a lot, and I've heard a lot of critics, you know, I've listened to a lot of shows that, you know, and I remember What the Flick, you know, I don't know if we've talked about What the Flick before in the past. R.I.P. The channel's no longer in existence anymore.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, R.I.P. But I remember one time they were discussing the whole article. There was a whole big like article or a big question that came up of whether or not critics should watch a certain number of movies to be, you know, considered a critic or whatever. And I remember one of the points that one of the hosts, Alfonso Durati, made, who I'm very close with, and I actually got to visit What the Flick Studios once too, which was really nice. It was very dope before they closed down. But like he has said, you know, like of course critics should have a certain amount of movie knowledge because movies are so free and accessible. You go to the library and get them anywhere. And like, and I respect, you know, Alfonso Durati very much, but I thought that was a little naive if you consider, you know, he grew, you know, if you go to, what I'm saying is if you go to the Compton Library, you're not finding any Jean-Luc Godard films there. You're not finding any German expressionism. You're not finding any Soviet, you know, realism. You're not getting any of that. You're getting what they have, and what they have is jack shit. And, you know, like I said, garbage in, garbage out. If you're going to watch garbage your entire life, you're only going to be able to appreciate garbage, or if you want to become a filmmaker, you're only going to be able to make garbage. You know what I mean? So that's always my biggest problem is that people don't understand the socio-economic differences that different communities face that inhibit their film literacy from growing, that inhibit them from having the same opportunities. And there's always little examples. Like I remember watching an award show a couple years ago when Alexander Payne, I think he had won Best Adapted Screenplay for The Descendants or whatever. And I think his acceptance speech was like, and this was in 2011, 2012, so this is me as a kid from Compton watching at home. He goes on stage and he's like, oh yeah, and I would like to thank my, you know, and all respect to Alexander Payne, everything we did the whole episode, and all respect to everything he says, but he says, oh, thank you to the Academy, and thank you for my mom for allowing me to miss school and taking me to see, and taking me to the movies. And to me, like, damn, like that kind of hurt me, not hurt, but I felt a certain kind of way about it, because for one, Compton doesn't even have a movie theater. Compton doesn't even have a movie theater, yet this dude is celebrating the fact that he got to miss high school, and I'm going, you know, and I'm literally just trying to make it by as a kid, right? Like not barely, you know, trying to see as many movies as possible. I used to movie hop a lot. That's how I saw movies. I go to movies once a month. Been to watch like 4 or 5 of them joints in one day, you know. Yeah. But like as a kid, that was very frustrating because it was like that just shows no regard for the people who don't have that opportunity. And I guess I won't be winning an Oscar because my mom's not taking me to dish school to watch some weird French movies or whatever, you know. So I don't know. I think that's where the discord has to be, and we have to put more emphasis on the opportunities that people are allotted.
And for me, I really want to make it clear that something that's happening now a lot, which is good, but not good in the same sense, is we're seeing a lot of people being called in for selective reviewing. And that to me is something that shouldn't really take place. Crazy Rich Asians. Well, let's get an Asian guy to come in here. Black Panther, let's get a black guy to come in. That's cool, and I respect that. No, I know. I'm not trying to call
it.
No, I'm not trying to call anyone out directly. RB3. I'm kidding. Because we see that happening a lot, and I really want to make it clear that this is my point of view. Obviously, it doesn't have to be yours, but let's have him in the room to begin with. Let's have him not review 1 month a year February movies or review only the Asian movies. Let's have him review all the movies. let's have him in the room in the first place. Let's not just be like, oh, we got to bring a black guy out because we're going to look bad, because that's a selfish perspective. Why don't you have that black guy in there to begin with if he's that good? You should have that black guy in there to begin with to review the freaking Dunkirk or whatever other white-ass movie is in theater, because that's the majority of movies are still white-ass movies. Why not? Because that, to me, is the true representation of diversity, is not just bringing in people to look better, but bringing in people to actually be on staff and actually be a writer, be a critic for a certain outlet. And that's on the outlets. I'm calling on the outlets. I'm calling them out. Because for me, it pisses me off when I see the outlets, the same outlets, writing article after article about diversity. And it's all bullshit. Because you still haven't hired one staff writer to be your critic, or you still haven't even outsourced to these other art house films that aren't really, who do we get to get Hereditary? Let's just get the same guy we always get. Why don't you get a Latino guy to review Hereditary? Why don't you get, it doesn't have to just be these types of movies, we have to get these types of people. And I feel like people are really, really missing the boat if they think that's diversity, because it isn't. It's important to include them. I'm not saying it's not. They should be included. But at the same time, they should have already been in there a long time ago. Yeah. And they should review every movie, not just the movies that you think we're going to look bad if we don't bring someone in who reaches that demographic. Yeah. And you're right. I don't know. That to me is like the biggest thing that kind of takes me back. Last thing I want to talk about RB3 before we finish up is the idea of YouTube reviews. Because, full disclosure, that's kind of where we come from as far as our backgrounds go, is obviously the Schmoes Know. I mean, all of us, we both met, interning for the Schmoes Know Show, who are film critics. And we see a lot nowadays.
First YouTube critics views.
There you go. And we're seeing nowadays of these YouTube critics kind of take a lot of hold as far as people's perspectives. They hold a lot of weight. But we kind of get the same ones as far as demographic goes. 20 to 30 white dudes saying the same thing over and over about their favorite movies. No offense against them. I love every single one of them, and I know quite a few of them. And I love them all, to be honest. And I respect a lot of their opinions. But for me, if we're going to start seeing it on a level like YouTube, a level that is very accessible to a lot of people, let's elevate other people who have different perspectives as well. Not just them, but others. To me, it's not necessarily about saying, don't listen to them, don't watch them, don't read their reviews, don't. The word don't doesn't exist for me. The word is do and do. The word is read those reviews, watch those reviews, get your perspective, and then do something else. Read a different perspective. Read someone else's reviews from a different demographic and a different background, so that can inform your true relation to a movie, because it's a relation, it's an emotional connection towards a movie that you have. That's the biggest thing that's going to come with a review, is your connection towards a movie. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but that's just my opinion.
No, I agree. But YouTube critics is definitely on the rise.
It is.
I think this has probably been one of the most one of the biggest rises of of any form of criticism that we've seen in the recent era. We look at the other guys like Jeremy Johns, good buddy of ours too, Jeremy Johns, Chris
Stuckman. I know Stuckman's a good guy. I know Stuckman.
Yeah,
these are all good people.
Yeah, Black Nerd's dope. You watch Black Nerd?
I've seen Black Nerd.
Hey, that's my guy. But he be doing too much Ninja Turtle shit. And I don't really fuck with the Ninja Turtles, but I fuck with Black Nerd, so that's what's up. There's I'm trying to think of what in our society has caused YouTube to blow up as big, because now obviously we used to have a lot of TV criticism. I remember when I was a kid, I used to watch a lot of TV criticism. There was this channel called Rose TV. They had the Leonard Maltin show. By the way, Leonard Maltin follows me on Twitter.
Hey, I was telling you earlier that I'm jealous, man. I'm so jealous. I saw him at the live showdown, and I'm like, come on, man. You can't follow me.
Leonard Maltin, one of the OGs, also teaches at USC. Fight on, baby. I'm not in this class, but I'm too scared to take this class. I'm scared. I don't like him anymore. But Maltin on movies, Richard Roper, all those guys, TV critics, on screen, on video. And I remember those guys used to be tight. I remember that was used to be my shit on TV, but once that channel kind of went away, and that's how I found Schmoes, by the way, too, was because I was watching Rose TV, and they used to have not the top 10 show that we know now, but a different top 10 show on Reels that was not created by Schmoes, but Schmoes used to be featured on it, where they would count down top 10 action scenes or top 10 whatever.
Cool.
And sometimes the Schmoes would just be on there. Christian Martin. This is back 2011. You know what I mean?
But now YouTube is replacing that.
Now YouTube, not a lot of people use cable anymore. That channel basically doesn't even exist anymore. But everybody is, on YouTube. And, we just saw Jeremy Johnson, 1 million subscribers recently. Chris Stuckman as well. And hopefully the movie critic space is expanding on YouTube. They're starting to accept more movie critics on Rotten Tomatoes, YouTube critics on Rotten Tomatoes. Then it comes back into the question again of qualifications, right? Are you not necessarily qualifications, but do you have the same education, same knowledge of film that, let's say, Amy Nicholson has, or let's say some other, who's another big critic right now? I don't know. McWeeny, Drew McWeeny, man, good guy. He's a great critic. But you don't know if they have the same amount of knowledge.
Well, let's finish up by saying, what are some of your favorite critics? Who are some of your favorite? On the spot, just one or two.
I mean, I'm always gonna say Roger Ebert. I mean, we've read a bunch of his stuff current throughout the history. Current. Oh, current.
R.I.P. though, but yeah.
R.I.P. Yeah. I mean, I still talk about Amy Nicholson a lot because I really like
Amy Nicholson.
I like the way she puts words together, and I also like who's that homie on. I always read his reviews, and I know he's a troll, but I always read Armand's White's reviews, man. I always read his reviews, man. Armand White. Maybe that's why I have so many spicy hot takes, because Armand White is like the king of trolling. Yeah. Maybe that's why I'm such a troll, because I read all his reviews. But see, that's a black guy. But see, Armand White, he's a black dude that we just can't claim. We just can't claim Armand White.
I don't think anyone wants to claim him.
We can't claim Armand White. Yeah. We can't claim him. But hey, man, he's funny as fuck. Who else? I don't know. I've been getting real into some of these online guys. I saw this video last night talking about Avengers Infinity War by this dude named Filmjoy, and he was talking about how much it sucked.
I hope you're joking right now. I'm the one who told you about that guy. And I told you I like him a lot, but his opinion is wrong.
He's right.
Straight up wrong.
He's right.
I always give a shout out to Alyssa Wilkinson from Vox. For anyone who knows what Vox is, it's a website or YouTube channel. I think she gives a really interesting perspective. And the fact that she's she's dope. I just think she's dope. Amy Nicholson's another one.
I also, like I mentioned, Alfonso Durati before. I actually read all of his reviews too. And he's one of those critics that I very much appreciate because it's very clear what he thinks about a movie.
And obviously, shout out to all the people we love.
Of course, shout out
Christian Mark,
JT,
I was gonna say, Alicia Malone. I love Alicia, and I love her opinions on stuff. Scott Mance, people who are more into film Twitter than actual film critic outlets, like film Twitter people like Scott Mance, Alicia Malone. Shout out to them. Jen Yamato, Anji Han.
Jen Yamato, yeah.
Those people are dope as well. And obviously, we already mentioned all the YouTube critics that we actually know, and they're kind of cool. So shout out to them too.
Everybody's dope.
I just feel like there needs to be the same shift that's happening with diversifying in front of the camera should happen behind the camera, and the people creating the opinions of what is good and what is bad should be people with different perspectives. That's it. All right, guys. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this episode of the Meaning Enough podcast. It's a little bit different than what we usually do. Next week, we'll be back with the same as usual, talking about different movies for the Meaning Enough podcast. I'm Ace.
It's RB3, and I gotta say before you do the official sign out, we gotta say thank you to all the fans for the 50th episode. This is a real milestone, man. This is a milestone. 50 episodes.
Thank you to the fans. Of course, we love you guys.
Yeah, I think we're gonna make it past 12. I think we're gonna make it past 12.
12?
I think we're gonna make it past 12.
Really?
You
hate me that much, RB3?
I thought we were either gonna get canceled.
Oh yeah. At that point, yeah, we still might.
Hey man, salute to Christian Harloff, Mike Ellis, and everybody at the Schmoes Know Network for giving us this platform on the iTunes feed. Everybody at Collider Podcast too for letting us use the YouTube channel.
Yeah, shout out to the other Collider Podcast.
Witching Hour,
shout out to Haley and Perry, shout out to Makuga and Thad.
Yeah, TV Talk and all the other programs. Riley Round, 101 with Christian Harloff, SIM with Tom Dagino. Salute to all of them, and also thank you to all of our fans that we've met in real life. You said you met some at the Schmodown Live. I met some at the Schmodown Live too. They've been nothing but great and actually give us a lot of words of encouragement. I remember having a good conversation with Kristen Smith one time too from the Facebook group.
Yeah, Kristen's awesome.
She's a good fan. And also thank you to Brian Ward.
And all the fans who always pop up on our YouTube channel are great too.
Yeah, and Twitter. Blue Bloom's Tari.
Alan Partridge.
Yeah, Alan Partridge. Laura.
Neil Varma, Guy Cole.
Yeah, Laura Horsable.
I love her. She's great.
Yeah.
I don't know how to pronounce it. I always forget.
Giant.
Anyway, shout out to you guys. We love you guys.
Keep tweeting at us, man, because I will retweet everything you tweet at. Everything.
And I'll respond to mostly everything you tweet. Mostly. Yeah. Anyway, guys, for the Meaning of Podcast, I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And we are peacing out. Peace out, guys.